I said no to the most dangerous man in Chicago, in front of everyone who mattered. Dante Moretti. His family owned half the city. People whispered his name like a prayer and a curse. No one refused him. No one even dared to think about refusing him. But I did. I was just a broke graduate student in a borrowed dress, and when he demanded I dance with him, I looked him straight in the eye and said no. The room went silent. Women gasped. Men looked away, and he smiled at me like a predator who had just found his next hunt. The next morning, white roses appeared at my door. Then rare books. Then my coffee, already paid for, still hot. He was everywhere, watching, learning, waiting. I thought he wanted revenge. I was wrong. What Dante Moretti wanted was far more terrifying than punishment. He wanted me. This story will show you that sometimes the most dangerous man in the room becomes your greatest protector. That saying no can open doors you never imagined. And that love often wears a face the world tells you to fear. If you love stories about strong women who refuse to be intimidated, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful story. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever said no when everyone expected you to say yes? And if this story speaks to you, share it with someone who needs courage today. Now let me tell you how one word changed everything. I never learned his name before I insulted him. That was the first mistake I made. The charity event at the Sinclair Hotel was precisely as grand as I had pictured when Becca, my roommate, convinced me to go. Thousands of fractured lights from crystal chandeliers danced across the polished marble floors below. Women in expensive gowns, each costing more than my entire year of tuition, drifted between tables overflowing with champagne glasses and perfect white roses. My own dress was borrowed, a simple navy blue thing designed to be overlooked, and I felt completely out of place, a fraud surrounded by inherited wealth and long-held secrets. Becca squeezed my arm, linking hers through mine. "Stay with me," she whispered urgently. "My boss told me that half the people in this room have connections you do not want to cross." I gave a nervous laugh. "What does that mean, like they avoid paying taxes?" She just looked at me. I did not press for an answer. I was only 23 years old, a graduate student completely buried in student loans. This sparkling, threatening world was not my own. I was merely a tourist for the night. That was the moment he walked toward me. He moved through the crowded ballroom as if the sea of people were parting for him. He was tall, with broad shoulders, and wore a black suit that seemed molded perfectly to his body. His dark hair was brushed back from his face, revealing a sharp jawline. His eyes were the color of smoke and cold steel. He was handsome, but in a calculated way, like a weapon that had been beautifully crafted for a single deadly purpose. When he came to a stop directly in front of me, the very air seemed to grow heavy. "You will dance with me." It was not a question. It was a command. I stared up at him, shocked by the raw authority in his voice. All around us, conversations faded away. People turned their heads to watch us, their expressions a mixture of things I could not decipher. There was curiosity and caution, but also something much sharper. "I am sorry," I managed to say. "One dance," he insisted. His gaze was intense, holding mine without blinking. "Say yes." Something felt deeply wrong about the way every single person was staring. I saw the woman standing next to me take a careful step away. I felt Becca's fingers dig into my arm, a silent, urgent warning. Urgent. Maybe it was the borrowed dress making me feel bold, or the champagne I drank too fast. Maybe it was because I had spent my entire life being polite when I wanted to scream. Whatever the reason, something inside of me finally broke. "No." His face showed no emotion, but the silence that fell over the room was sudden and complete. "No," he said, the words sounding strange in his mouth, as if he were feeling its shape for the first time. "I do not know who you are," I said, my voice surprisingly firm, betraying the wild beating of my heart. And I have no interest in dancing with a stranger who does not understand how to ask for something politely. Somewhere nearby, a person gasped. His eyes, fixed on mine, seemed to darken almost imperceptibly. You should change your mind. No, I really should not. My pulse was hammering against my ribs, but I forced myself to lift my chin. I appreciate the offer, but I'm going to decline. For a long moment, he just looked at me. He truly looked, as if he were committing every single feature of my face to memory, filing it away for some future purpose. Then, a slow smile spread across his lips. It held no warmth. There was no kindness in it. It was the smile of a predator that had just made a decision about its prey. And I knew I would not like what he decided. Brave, he murmured, his voice low. Or very foolish. With that, he turned and walked away. The entire crowd seemed to let out a breath it had been holding. Becca seized my wrist, her face drained of all color. Do you have any idea who you just spoke to? Does it matter? I asked. That was Dante Moretti, she said, her voice a terrified whisper. His family basically owns this city. People do not say no to him, Elena. People are too afraid to even think about saying no to him. A shard of ice slid down my spine. I had no idea. It does not matter now, she said, pulling me forcefully toward the main doors. We have to get out of here. We need to go this instant. But as we hurried through the grand double doors and into the crisp night air, I felt it. It was a heavy pressure, the unmistakable feeling of his gaze locked onto me. I risked a single glance over my shoulder. He was standing at the window, a dark silhouette outlined by the golden light of the ballroom, watching me vanish into the darkness. And I understood with a horrifying certainty that this was far from over. The flowers showed up the very next morning. 24 perfect white roses arrived in a heavy crystal vase, delivered directly to my apartment. There was no card. There was only the flowers, immaculate and chilling. Becca looked at them as if they were a bomb. He knows where you live, Elena. Maybe they are from someone else, I offered weakly. Elena, she said, giving me a look that shattered my denial. Who else would send you something like this the morning after you shot him down in front of everyone? I reached out and touched a single petal. It was as soft as silk. What could he possibly want? I do not know, she admitted. But a man like Dante Moretti does not take no for an answer. He sees it as a new game to win. I should have been terrified, but instead, a different feeling began to stir inside me, something far more dangerous. It was curiosity. For the next week, the deliveries did not stop. A rare first edition of a novel appeared at the campus library, addressed to me. A dinner reservation was made in my name at a famous restaurant, a place I had once mentioned wanting to visit in a conversation I could not even recall having. My usual morning coffee was waiting for me at my favorite cafe. It was already paid for. It was still hot. He was making a point, showing me that he was always there, listening, watching me, and learning every detail about me. You have to report this, Becca pleaded, as I stared at the book, a priceless collection of poetry I had referenced in a research paper months ago. You need to file a report with the police. This is stalking, Elena. He is not actually threatening me, I argued. Even as the words left my mouth, I was not certain that I believed them. But when I decided to ignore his gestures, the gifts stopped, and something far more disturbing started. I began to see him. It was never up close, and he never spoke a word to me. He was just present. I would see him across the street as I walked out of a lecture hall. I would notice a black car idling on the corner as I walked home from work. I would spot him standing deep in the shadows of the campus courtyard, smoke swirling from his cigarette, his eyes following my every move. He never got closer. He never said a word. He only watched. The constant surveillance should have filled me with dread. Instead, it made my heart race in a way I could not begin to understand. One evening I stopped walking and turned to face the dark sedan that had been tailing me for 3 blocks. The passenger window glided down silently. He was sitting in the back seat, his expression impossible to read in the dim light. "Get in." "There is absolutely no way." "Elena." Hearing my name spoken in his deep voice felt disturbingly intimate. It felt wrong. "Get in the car." "Why are you doing this to me?" My own voice was shaking. "I told you no. That should have been the end of our conversation." "It was never going to be the end," he said. He leaned forward just enough for the yellow streetlight to illuminate his features. They were sharp, beautiful, and utterly dangerous. "You made a very public choice in a room full of everyone who matters in this city. You embarrassed me." "So this is about getting revenge?" I asked. "No." His gaze held mine through the open car window. "This is a correction." "I do not understand what that means." "You will," he promised. The window slid up, and the car silently pulled away from the curb, leaving me completely alone on the quiet street. When I finally got back to my apartment, my body trembling, I saw another gift waiting for me. It was a small black velvet box. Inside there was a key. There was no note this time, no explanation, just a single silver key resting on a bed of black satin. My fingers shook as I picked it up. As I held it, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "You will need that very soon." I stared at the text message, then at the key in my hand, then at the oppressive darkness outside my windows, and I realized with a slow, creeping horror that Dante Moretti was not trying to court me. He was in the process of claiming me as his own. I refused to use the key. For 3 full days, I carried it around in my pocket like it was a cursed charm, its cold weight a constant reminder against my leg. I promised myself I would throw it into the river. I told myself I would take it to the authorities. But I did neither of those things. I kept it. On the 4th day, Becca did not return home from work. Her shift at the restaurant was supposed to end at 10 o'clock. By midnight, she was still not picking up her phone. By 1 in the morning, a cold, sharp panic had fully taken hold of me. I called the restaurant, and they confirmed she had left right on time. I called all of her friends, but nobody had seen or heard from her. I even called the police. They told me I had to wait for 24 hours before filing a report. At 2 in the morning, my phone screen lit up. It was the unknown number again. "She is safe, for now." My blood ran cold in my veins. A second message appeared. "Use the key." My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type a reply. "Where is she?" The response was immediate. "The address is already programmed into your navigation system. Come by yourself. You have 30 minutes. I should have called the police again. I should have screamed for help. I should have done anything in the world other than what I did next. But the agonizing thought of Becca being hurt because of me, all because I said no to the wrong man, made the choice brutally simple. I grabbed my coat from the hook and ran out the door. The directions led me deep into the warehouse district, a place where huge industrial buildings sat like sleeping beasts under a black, starless sky. My little car seemed absurd here, tiny and exposed among the giant shipping containers and endless concrete. The building that matched the address was a converted warehouse with windows that were completely blacked out and only a single steel door. I walked toward it on legs that felt like they might give out, took out the key, and pushed it into the lock. It turned with a smooth, effortless click. The moment I stepped inside, the world changed completely. The warehouse was actually a magnificent penthouse apartment. The exposed brick walls were covered with original, expensive-looking artwork. Supple leather furniture was arranged around a large fireplace where real flames danced and crackled. Massive floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the sparkling city lights. And sitting there in a large armchair with a glass of whiskey in his hand was Dante Moretti. "Where is she?" I demanded, my voice cracking with fear and exhaustion. "She is upstairs," he said calmly. "She is asleep, and she is completely unharmed." "You kidnapped my friend." "I retrieved her," he corrected. He placed his glass on a table and rose to his feet, moving toward me with that same smooth, predatory grace I remembered. She was being followed by men who intended to use her to hurt you. I simply eliminated the threat. You are lying to me. Am I? He asked softly. He took out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, and then angled it so I could see. The video playing showed Becca leaving the restaurant last night. It clearly showed three men dressed in dark clothing step out of an alley and begin to follow her, their pace quickening. Then, the video suddenly switched to a different camera angle. It showed Dante's men appearing from nowhere and intercepting them. There was a short, efficient struggle. The three men were quickly subdued and restrained on the ground. Becca was being gently guided into a black car, looking confused, but physically safe. The room started to spin. Who were those men? They are business rivals, he explained. People who have noticed that I seem to have a new distraction lately. His intense eyes locked with mine. Because of you, Elena. This is completely insane, I whispered. This is the world I live in, he stated simply. He took another step closer, forcing me to back away until my shoulders hit the cold, solid door. You stepped into my world the moment you humiliated me at that party. You do not get to just walk away now because you have become afraid. I am not afraid of you, I said, the lie tasting bitter in my mouth. Liar, he said, and he was right. I was terrified, but it was not for the reasons he imagined. I was terrified because a small, treacherous part of me actually wanted to stay. It wanted to understand this impossible man who collected rare poetry and orchestrated brutal violence with the same meticulous, careful hands. What is it that you want from me? I whispered, almost to myself. His hand moved towards me with deliberate slowness, giving me every chance to flinch away. He carefully tucked a loose strand of my hair behind my ear, and his touch was so gentle it felt impossible. I need you to truly see me, he murmured, his voice low. Forget the name. Forget what you have heard. Just see me. I had to ask. Why? He answered. Because for the last 10 years, every single person has shown me fear. You were the first to look me in the eye and simply say no. A shadow of something crossed his face, a raw vulnerability that he immediately concealed. I have to know what makes you different. I did not know who you were. You knew enough, he countered. Everyone in this city warned you to be terrified of me. His thumb gently traced the line of my jaw. But you refused to back down. That kind of bravery is exceptionally rare, and it is also very dangerous. Is that what this is about? You are doing this because I present a challenge? For a moment, his hand fell away from my face. It was at first, but not anymore. I could not fully grasp his meaning, but I felt the truth of it in the space between us. The atmosphere had changed completely. This was no longer about power or games. Let me bring you to Becca, he said, taking a step back to give me space. Allow me to prove that I am not your enemy. Then what are you? He offered a sad, knowing smile. That is what we will discover over the next month. When I went upstairs, I found Becca sound asleep in a guest room that was far more luxurious than any five-star hotel. She was perfectly safe and completely unharmed, just as he had promised she would be. When I came back down the stairs, Dante was standing by the main door, waiting. My driver is ready to take you both back to your home, he explained. He held out a heavy, ornate key. But Elena, I stopped, my hand on the doorknob. You should keep this. I have a feeling you are going to need it again. Why would I ever choose to return to this place? I asked. His eyes were full of secrets, a depth of history I could not even begin to understand. Because you have had a glimpse inside this world now, he said, and a part of you will always want to understand the rest of it. The most infuriating part was that I knew he was absolutely right. He gave me 3 full days of complete silence. That was 3 days for me to try and convince myself that the entire ordeal was finished. It was time for me to believe that the strange key sitting in my desk drawer was just a bizarre memento from an encounter with a dark night. I told myself that Dante Moretti would quickly forget me and find someone much better suited for his violent and dangerous life. Then, on the 4th day, someone made an attempt on my life. I was just leaving the campus library after a long night of studying when a car suddenly accelerated over the curb. There was no warning at all, just the piercing scream of tires on pavement and a flash of dark metal hurtling directly toward me. I was frozen in place. In that split second, strong hands seized my waist and violently pulled me backward. We slammed onto the hard pavement, my fall cushioned by someone else's body. The car collided with the streetlight right where I had been standing only a moment before. I could not get any air into my lungs. My mind was completely blank. "Do not move." It was Dante's voice, harsh and strained right next to my ear. His powerful arms were wrapped around me like a vice, and I could feel his heart hammering against my back. The car's engine roared as it shifted into reverse. I was certain it was coming back to finish the job, but then a massive black sport utility vehicle appeared from out of nowhere, blocking its path completely. Men dressed in dark suits got out, and the sound of gunfire echoed through the quiet night. The shots were sharp, quick, and ruthlessly efficient. Then there was only silence. Dante immediately pulled me up to my feet. His hands moved urgently over my arms and shoulders, his fingers checking me for any injuries. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. I could only shake my head, still too shocked to speak. "Get her out of here," he commanded to someone behind me. "Take her to the safe house, now." "Wait!" I finally managed to find my voice. What just happened? His jaw was clenched so tightly it looked like it was carved from stone, and waves of pure fury were rolling off of him. "Someone just made a move to take you away from me," he snarled. "That is a mistake that will not happen again." "Take me from you? I do not belong to you." He cupped my face with both of his hands, his grip firm, forcing me to look directly into his eyes. "Yes, you do. You became mine from the very moment you spoke my name to me. You just were not aware of it yet." Before I had a chance to argue, I was being guided into the back of the sport utility vehicle. Dante got in right beside me, his phone already pressed to his ear as he spoke in rapid, fluent Italian. I could not understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable. These were commands and threats, the language of absolute violence spoken with a cold, elegant precision. The safe house was not a house at all. It was a stunning penthouse apartment in one of the most exclusive and expensive buildings in the city. The walls were mostly glass and steel, with security cameras visible in every corner. "You are going to stay right here," Dante stated, shrugging off his tailored jacket. I saw then that there was blood staining the sleeve of his shirt, but it was not his own. "My men will be posted outside the door. You will not leave this apartment without me." "This is not protection," I said, my voice trembling. "This is kidnapping." "This is what is keeping you alive," he corrected me. He poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter and drank it down in one motion. "The people who tried to take your life tonight are not going to give up. Their next attempt will be even more aggressive. Do you fully comprehend what that means?" "No," I whispered. "I do not understand any of this." My voice finally broke. "I am nobody. I am just a graduate student. Why would anyone on earth want me dead?" "Because I want you alive," he said. The stark simplicity of his words left me breathless. He put his glass down and walked toward me slowly, as if he expected me to run. "I have many enemies, Elena. I have entire families who have been waiting for years to see any sign of weakness from me. And you," he said, stopping in front of me, "you are now my weakness. They noticed the very second I showed an interest in you, the moment I started having you watched, having you protected." "Then just stop," I pleaded. I hugged my arms tightly around my body. "Just forget that you ever met me. Let me have my old life back." "I cannot do that." "Why not?" His expression was filled with genuine anguish. "Because even if I were to walk away from you right now, they would not. You have already been marked by them. The only possible way for you to survive what is coming is for you to remain close to me. You must stay under my protection." I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to cry and rage against how profoundly unfair this all was. But instead, I asked him the single question that truly mattered. For how long? Until I have eliminated the threat, he said. But then his voice trailed off. Until what? I pressed. Until you finally understand, he finished, his eyes dark, that you are far safer inside my world than you ever were out there in yours. In the days that followed, I began to learn the strict rhythm of my new captivity. Dante's security team rotated in shifts outside the penthouse door. I was given access to absolutely everything I needed. My university textbooks were delivered, along with my laptop. All of my meals were prepared by a private chef. I was able to continue my studies, do my work, and even have video calls with my professors. But I was never allowed to leave. And every single evening, Dante would come. He never made a move to touch me, and he never pushed for anything more. He would just arrive sometime after dark, pour himself a glass of whiskey, and ask me about how I had spent my day. We would talk for hours about literature, about philosophy, about every topic imaginable except for the simmering violence that existed right outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Why do you continue to do this?" I asked him one night, observing him from the other side of the vast living room. "This life you lead, this entire empire that you have built on a foundation of fear." "I was born into this life," he replied without looking at me. "I never had a choice in the matter." He continued to stare down into his glass. "My father was killed when I was only 19 years old. The entire business fell to me overnight. I had to either become strong enough to hold it all together or stand by and watch as the vultures destroyed my entire family." "There must have been another way," I insisted. "There was not," he said flatly. His eyes finally lifted to meet mine. "In the world I come from, Elena, you are either the predator or you are the prey. There is absolutely no middle ground. There is no peaceful retirement plan. You either survive or you die." "That is not really living," I said softly. "No," he quietly agreed. "It is not." The raw vulnerability I heard in his voice caused something to crack open deep inside my chest. "What would you do?" I asked him very carefully. "If you could just walk away from all of it, what would you do?" A faint smile touched his lips, but it was sad and did not reach his eyes. "I would buy a small house somewhere by the sea, a place where absolutely no one knows my name. I would spend all day reading books, and I would be able to sleep without a gun tucked under my pillow." He took a long pause. "And I would find a woman who looks at me as if I am just a man and not some kind of monster." "I do not believe that you are a monster," I told him. His head snapped up, his gaze instantly locking with mine. "Then what do you believe I am?" "I do not know yet," I answered honestly, but I was beginning to suspect. I was starting to see beyond the violence and the immense power to the much more complicated man underneath it all. I was seeing something that frightened me far more than any weapon or any threat ever could. It was something that felt strangely like recognition. 2 weeks after my captivity began, I realized I had stopped thinking of it that way. Because to be in captivity would imply that I still wanted to leave. And the truth, which was becoming more difficult for me to deny each day, was that I felt safer inside Dante's lavish penthouse than I had ever felt in my own small apartment. I felt safer than I had felt in many years, perhaps safer than I had felt in my entire life. That powerful realization should have sent a chill of horror through me. Instead, the feeling settled deep into my bones as if it were an undeniable truth. "Your friend has been calling you," one of Dante's men informed me one afternoon. "Becca, she is getting very worried." "I have been sending her text messages," I explained. "She wants to come and visit you." I looked over at Dante, who had just walked in for his nightly ritual. He was still wearing his expensive suit, but he had loosened his tie. I could see a tightness in his shoulders, a sign I had learned to recognize that meant the day had been particularly difficult. "Would it be safe for her to come here?" I asked him. He took a moment to consider it. I can make the arrangements. She can have 1 hour here with full security in place. Thank you, I said. His intense expression seemed to soften just a little. You do not need to thank me for allowing you to see your friend, Elena. Do I not? I challenged, meeting his gaze directly. You are in control of every single part of my life now. I only control the parts that are keeping you breathing, he replied. Becca showed up the very next day, her eyes growing wide as she took in the sheer luxury of the penthouse. The instant the heavy front door closed behind her, she rushed over and grabbed my arms. Are you all right? Are you really okay? I am fine, Becca. I promise you. I tried to reassure her. Elena, this entire situation is insane. You are living here with a known Mafia boss. I am not living with him, I corrected her. I am staying here under his protection. What is the real difference between the two? She demanded. I did not have a good answer for her. She carefully studied my face, and then her own expression turned to one of pale shock. Oh my God, she whispered. You are developing feelings for him. I am not, I said too quickly. Do not lie to me, Elena. I can see it written all over your face. Her voice dropped to a concerned whisper. You cannot be serious about this. This man is dangerous. He has almost certainly killed people. I am aware of what he is. Are you? She pressed. Because from where I am standing right now, you look like someone who is starting to forget what reality is. And maybe she was right. Maybe I was losing my perspective entirely. I was a prisoner in a glittering sky-high cage, my keeper a man who talked of brutality with the same casualness most people reserve for the weather forecast. Yet, when Dante's gaze fell on me, the monster vanished. I saw a man worn down by the part life had assigned him, someone desperate to be defined by more than his darkest deeds. Once Becca was gone, I located him on the terrace, a cigarette smoldering between his fingers. The vast city below was a galaxy of lights, completely unconcerned with our tangled lives. She is concerned about you, he stated, his back still to me. She has every right to be. Does she really? He finally shot a look over his shoulder. Do you feel endangered in this place? For a moment, I weighed the option of a lie. I could say yes, could weaponize that fear to bargain for my release. But deception was never my strength. No, I confessed, the word a mere whisper. I feel the complete opposite, and that terrifies me more than anything. He pivoted to face me, the cigarette now an afterthought. Why would that frighten you? Because a person like me should never feel secure with someone like you. It defies all logic. You have shattered my entire world. You painted a target on my back. My liberty is gone because of you. Still, when you are here, my nightmares cease. The admission felt like a plunge into an abyss. When you are not here, my mind races. I am not worried for myself, but for you. I wonder if you are unharmed, if you are even coming back. None of this is ordinary. Nothing about our situation is, he agreed, closing the distance between us, his voice a low rumble. But perhaps being ordinary is not what it is made out to be. Perhaps this thing we have is superior. And what exactly do we have? I challenged. He lifted his hand, his fingertips pausing just an inch from my skin, a breath of space separating us. Honesty, he answered. Around you, I make no effort to fake my own goodness, and you make no effort to hide how I impact you. Believe me, that is more uncommon than you can imagine. My lungs seized when his hand finally bridged the gap, his palm a warm, solid weight against my cheek. I need to kiss you, he confessed softly. I have had this need since that first moment you denied me, but I will not act until you give me your permission. My pulse pounded against my ribs. Why? Because you are owed the decision I attempted to steal from you before. This time, you will be the one to determine what happens. I knew I should refuse. My body should have recoiled. My mind should have screamed every reason this was a catastrophe. But with his hand on my skin and the city glowing behind him, every rational thought dissolved into nothing. Yes. The word escaped me on a fragile breath. His kiss was a study in gentleness, as if I were something priceless and easily broken. He was careful, holding himself in check, while his other hand came to support my head. His lips were unexpectedly soft, his touch full of a deep respect I did not expect. I was trembling when he finally drew away. "Are you all right?" he murmured, his thumb brushing softly across my cheek. I could only manage a nod, certain my voice would fail me. "We are not in a hurry. We can take our time." Yet the statement hung in the air, hollow and untrue. We were both aware that in his violent reality, time was a commodity we could not afford. That single moment altered the entire landscape between us. Following that evening, Dante's presence was a paradox. He was somehow closer and farther away at once. His nightly visits continued without fail, but a new, charged consciousness crackled in the space between us, something thrilling and perilous. He would choose a seat nearer to me. His hand would rest on mine for a moment longer than necessary. He observed me with a focus that made my entire body flush, and yet, he never repeated the kiss. "Why not?" I demanded one evening, worn thin by the ironclad control etched into his very posture. "Because the moment I begin," he replied with great deliberation, "I will have no desire to end it, and you are not yet prepared for where that leads." "How can you be so sure of what I am prepared for?" "Because you still recoil when my associates talk about their work. Because you shut your eyes tightly whenever I mention my rivals. Because a part of you is desperately trying to believe this is all a bad dream." His stare held me captive. "I will know when you have ceased your struggle." "That sounds like arrogance." "It sounds like experience," he corrected. I wanted to protest, to deny it all, but the truth was that he had seen right through me. A piece of my soul was still waiting for the nightmare to end, to be jolted back into my ordinary existence. I was constantly trying to separate the two Dantes, the one who could plan a man's demise over a meal, and the one who would quietly bring me chamomile tea, having observed my restless nights. That dividing line, however, was becoming impossibly blurry. 3 weeks into my confinement, Dante vanished. On the first night, I reasoned that he was occupied. By the second, a knot of anxiety had formed in my stomach. On the third night, I stalked the length of the penthouse, my agitation growing, demanding information from his guards. "He is attending to some affairs," one of them finally offered. "He will be back when the situation is secure." "What sort of affairs?" I pressed. Silence was my only reply. On the fourth night, I made a decision and used the key. It was a foolish, impulsive act, the very thing Dante had forbidden. But the uncertainty was eating me alive. The suffocating silence was too much to bear. When I got to the warehouse, it was shrouded in blackness. My fingers trembled as I turned the lock and pushed the heavy door open. The penthouse was a scene of utter destruction. Tables and chairs were flipped over. Shards of glass littered the floor like deadly jewels. And in the middle of the wreckage, Dante was on the ground, his back slumped against the sofa, his knuckles stained red. "This is not a place for you right now," he said, his gaze fixed on the floor. I hurried to his side and fell to my knees. "You are injured. The blood is not mine." That information should have brought relief, but it only made things worse. "Tell me what transpired." "I was betrayed. Someone from my inner circle." His voice was empty, devoid of all emotion. "He sold secrets to my rivals. He guided them to a valuable transport. I lost 3 good men because of his actions." "And where is this man now?" His gaze finally lifted to mine, and the cold fury I saw there stole the air from my lungs. "The situation has been resolved." I knew precisely what his words implied. I grasped the finality of what he had done. A wave of terror should have sent me fleeing from the room. I should have been repulsed, but I did not run. Instead, I reached for his hand, the one smeared with another's lifeblood, and enclosed it in my own. "I am so sorry," I breathed. For what? He asked, confused. That this is the life you must lead. That these are the decisions you are forced to make. A fracture appeared in his hardened expression. You ought to be terrified of me, not trying to soothe me. I know, Dante, I said. My name on his lips was both a plea and a threat. You have to get out of here before I make a mistake that we cannot undo. But what if leaving is the last thing I want to do? His jaw clenched. Do not say things like that. Why should I not? I moved nearer, closing the small space between us. You told me you would be patient until my resistance ended. Well, my struggle is over, Dante. You have no idea what you are truly requesting. Then make me understand. For what felt like an eternity, he simply stared at me, his eyes searching mine. Then he rose to his feet, bringing me up along with him. His actions were deliberate and steady, a stark contrast to the storm of violence I could feel radiating from him. If I do this, he said in a low voice, there is no retreat. You will be exposed to every part of me, every piece I have kept in shadow, the very blackness I have shielded you from. Are you absolutely certain this is what you desire? My heart hammered against my ribs. Yes. He examined my features intently, as if committing them to memory, searching for any hint of hesitation. And then his mouth was on mine. This was not a tender kiss. It was not cautious. This was raw appetite and a claim of ownership, the culmination of 3 agonizing weeks of denial shattering into 1,000 pieces. His fingers wound tightly in my hair as he backed me against the nearest wall. A small gasp escaped me, which he immediately consumed, his tongue deepening the kiss until the very idea of keeping my distance became an alien concept. When he finally broke the kiss, we were both gasping for air. You must be certain, he breathed, his lips brushing against mine. Tell me that you are. I am certain, I whispered back. His intense gaze swept over my face one final time before he took my hand. He guided me up the stairs and into his bedroom, a threshold we both knew we could never uncross. The room was intimate and dim, with massive windows that revealed the sparkling cityscape far below. A large bed was the room's centerpiece, surrounded by a color palette of charcoal and slate. As Dante shut the door, the expansive space seemed to shrink, and the very air grew thick with anticipation. I remained in the middle of the room, my body shaking with a feeling that was not fear. He moved toward me with unhurried steps, a clear invitation for me to reconsider. Upon reaching me, he cradled my face in his hands, his thumb gently stroking my bottom lip. We can end this at any moment, he promised softly. You only have to speak. I managed a small nod, unable to find my voice. Tell me your desire, he murmured, his lips warm against the skin of my neck. Words failed me completely. I could not give voice to the overwhelming current of need that was flooding my senses. So I tried to communicate with my hands instead, my trembling fingers fumbling for the buttons on his shirt. He gently captured my wrists. Elena, your eyes on me. I lifted my gaze to meet his. I have to hear the words from you, he insisted. It is vital that I know this is your desire, that this is your choice. My attempt at a response was nearly silent. I am not sure how to phrase it. Make an attempt, he urged. I drew in a shaky breath. I want to feel a connection with you. I am tired of teetering on the brink of this precipice. I am ready to let go. A visible tenderness softened his features. Then let go, he said. I will be there to catch you. He kissed me once more, and when my hands went back to his shirt, he did not stop me. In fact, he assisted, shrugging the garment off his shoulders and letting it drop silently to the carpet. I had often wondered what lay beneath his immaculate suits, but the truth was far more complex. A network of scars mapped his torso, a permanent record of past violence etched into his skin. It was the undeniable proof of an existence defined by peril. My fingertips reached out and brushed against a single scar, a long, faded mark that ran along his ribcage. A knife, he explained softly. That was 5 years back. My fingers moved to trace a different one, a puckered circle, a bullet, 7 years ago. Every mark told a tale of survival. Every line was a stark testament to just how fragile his life was, how quickly he could be taken from me. Does this frighten you? He questioned, noticing my focus. No. I lifted my head to meet his gaze. It fills me with sorrow to see how many times you have been wounded. Elena. He whispered my name as if it were a painful confession. Then his mouth found mine again, the kiss more profound this time, as his hands went to the back of my dress. He removed my clothing with a slow, deliberate care, as if he were handling something of immense value. When I was left in only my underthings, I had to resist the instinct to hide my body. "You are exquisite," he declared, and the profound sincerity in his tone made the words feel true. He lifted me from the floor as if I were weightless, carried me to the bed, and placed me down with care before covering my body with his own. "Let me know if this becomes overwhelming," he murmured, pressing a kiss to my collarbone. "You must tell me if I need to be slower." I nodded, my own hands coming to rest on his powerful shoulders, feeling the tightly wound energy within his muscles. He moved with deliberate slowness, placing kisses on every part of my skin he could reach. He was mapping my body, discovering the places that made me draw a sharp breath and the ones that made me press myself closer to him. His touch was an exercise in patience, a careful exploration meant to dismantle my defenses one by one. "Dante." I breathed his name, a plea against the sweet agony of his unhurried pace. "I know," he murmured, his lips finding mine for a soft kiss. "I know." He turned toward the nightstand and retrieved protection from the drawer. Even with the raw desire burning in his eyes, his hands were perfectly steady. He positioned himself over me, a dark silhouette against the city lights. "This is your last chance," he said, his voice low and serious. "If you want me to stop, tell me now, and I will." I lifted my hand, letting my fingers trace the line of his jaw. "Don't you dare stop." He entered me with a measured pace, allowing my body to welcome him. A gasp escaped my lips at the overwhelming feeling, and my nails dug into the hard muscle of his shoulders. He froze instantly. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice thick with restraint. "Yes," I whispered. "Please." He began to move, cautiously at first, his gaze locked on mine, searching for any hint of pain. But as I melted around him, as my body accepted him completely, his iron control started to fray. His thrusts grew deeper, his rhythm more demanding. He buried his face in the curve of my neck, his breathing growing ragged. "You are mine," he whispered, the words a hot brand against my skin. "Say it." I was lost, unable to form words. I could only cling to him as waves of pleasure, stronger than anything I had ever known, crashed over me. "Elena," he insisted, his voice a low growl. "Say it." "Yours," I finally managed to choke out. "I am yours." A deep groan rumbled through his chest, his rhythm breaking for a moment. Then his mouth crashed down on mine in a kiss that was a brand of ownership, and my world splintered into 1,000 brilliant pieces. He followed me into the abyss moments later, crying out my name. After, we remained a tangle of limbs, our breathing harsh in the quiet room. He gathered me close, tucking me against his chest as his hand gently stroked my hair. "You okay?" he asked softly. I could only nod against his solid form. "Are you?" He let out a low laugh that vibrated through me. "I am so much better than okay." We lay like that for a long time, cocooned together while the lights of the city twinkled outside the vast windows. "What happens now?" I eventually asked into the comfortable silence. "Now?" His arms tightened their hold on me possessively. "Now, I ensure that nothing in this entire world can ever harm you again. Now, I will demonstrate that placing your trust in me was not a mistake." "I do not believe it was a mistake." "You cannot know that yet," he murmured. "But you will." He pressed a kiss to my forehead. I will dedicate every single day to proving it to you. It sounded like a solemn vow. In his world, as I was quickly discovering, a vow was a sacred thing. Promises were often sealed with blood. But as I lay there, safe in his arms, I found that the thought did not scare me at all. I awoke to a bed that was cold and empty, and the sharp crack of gunfire. For a single confused second, I believed it was part of a nightmare. Then, one of the massive windows exploded inward. "Stay down!" Dante stormed back into the room, already fully dressed with a gun in his hand. He covered the distance between us in 3 long strides, grabbing me and pulling me from the bed and onto the relative safety of the floor. A shower of glass rained down around us. Another volley of gunfire erupted, followed by angry shouts in Italian from somewhere else in the building. What is happening? I could barely make out my own question over the frantic hammering of my heart. "They have found us," he said, his voice grim. He covered my body with his own, already dialing a number on his phone with his free hand. "How many?" he barked into the device. More yelling, more shots fired. "Stay right behind me," he commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Do not look around. Do not make a sound. Just move exactly when I tell you to move." We began to crawl on our hands and knees toward the bedroom door. I focused all my attention on his broad back, watching the muscles tighten with every violent sound that echoed from the floors below. The penthouse, which had felt like a fortress just hours before, now seemed like a deadly cage. As soon as we were in the hallway, 2 of his men appeared, flanking us instantly. "Service elevator," Dante commanded. "Move now." We moved quickly. I scrambled to keep up while his men advanced with the chilling efficiency of soldiers, their weapons raised as they scanned every corner. The entire building seemed to vibrate from the force of doors being broken down and the relentless exchange of gunfire. "How many are there?" Dante asked his man again. "At least 10 of them." "Rossetti family." A muscle in Dante's jaw jumped. "They are getting reckless." We finally made it to the service elevator. The metal doors slid open, and I was shoved inside without ceremony. But just before Dante could step in after me, one of his men caught his arm. "Sir, they have reached the lobby. We have to lead them away from her." For a fleeting second, I saw indecision war across Dante's face. Then his intense gaze found mine. "Marco will get you to the safe house on the other side of the river," he said. "You will stay there. Do not leave for any reason whatsoever." "I am not going to leave you." "Yes," he said firmly. "You are." He cupped my face between his large hands and gave me a hard, desperate kiss. "This is not a negotiation, Elena. I have to know that you are safe. I cannot fight them if my mind is worried about you. You have to trust me. I will come for you." The elevator doors began to close, and I watched him disappear as we started our descent. Marco, a man I knew to be one of Dante's most loyal, kept his pistol aimed at the closing doors. "Do not worry, miss," he said. "The boss has made it through far worse than this." But even I could detect the thread of uncertainty in his voice. The safe house turned out to be a plain, unremarkable apartment in an old, weathered building. Marco did a thorough sweep of the place, checking for any threats, before taking up a position near the single entrance. "How long do we wait?" I asked, unable to stop pacing the worn wooden floors. "For as long as it takes," he replied. The hours that followed felt like an eternity. I had no appetite for food. I could not force myself to sit still. Every little noise from the hallway made me flinch. Every creak of the old building sent my heart into a frantic rhythm. Suddenly, my phone vibrated. An unknown number. "He is bleeding out. Did you realize that your precious Dante is lying wounded in the street, all because he got involved with you?" I stared at the words on the screen, a chilling cold spreading through my entire body. A second message appeared. "This is the price of loving him. Every single person he cares about becomes a bullseye. How many more people have to die because he decided he wanted you?" I showed the phone to Marco. His face grew dark. "Block that number immediately." Do not reply. Is it true? I asked, my voice trembling. Is he hurt? If he were dead, we would have received word by now. His answer was blunt. That means he is still in the fight. It was not very comforting. At midnight, the door to the apartment burst open. Dante stumbled across the threshold. He was supported on either side by two of his men. His white shirt was soaked through with blood. His face was ghostly pale, but he was alive. "Oh my God," I gasped, rushing toward him. "I am fine," he said, but his voice was thin and weak. "It is just a graze." "That is not a graze. There was far too much blood." His men carefully guided him to the couch. One of them, an older man who was obviously a medic, started to cut away the ruined shirt. The wound was in his side, a dark, ugly thing that was still bleeding steadily. I dropped to my knees beside the couch and took his hand in mine. "You promised you would be careful." "I was," he said, attempting a smile that turned into a grimace. "You should see what the other guys look like now." "This is not funny," I whispered. "No," he conceded, wincing as the medic began to clean the wound. "It is not." They worked on him for what felt like a lifetime, disinfecting, stitching, and bandaging. He never uttered a single sound of pain, but I felt his hand tighten its grip on mine with every pass of the needle. When they were finally done, everyone filed out of the room, leaving us alone. "Come here," he said softly. I cautiously climbed onto the couch next to him, very careful not to jostle his injury. He pulled me close against his uninjured side. "I am sorry," he whispered into my hair. "I am so sorry that you had to witness this, that you had to live through this. I am just so glad that you are alive." "They came for you, Elena," he said, his voice raw with a mixture of pain and fury. "They knew you would be at my apartment. They knew how much you mean to me." The weight of his words settled on me. "I have made you a target. That is the one thing I swore to myself I would never, ever do." "This is not your fault," I insisted. "It is," he countered. "Everything that enters my world eventually becomes corrupted. Everyone I allow myself to touch gets hurt." I pulled back so I could look him in the eye. "Then it is a good thing that I am not fragile. You are the most fragile thing I have ever held in my life." "No." I cupped his face in my hands, forcing him to meet my gaze. "I am the woman who chose you, who continues to choose you every single day. That choice makes me strong, not fragile." His eyes searched mine, full of a pain that had nothing to do with his wound. "Why? Why would you ever choose this life? Why choose me?" "Because beneath all the violence and the power," I said softly, "I can see you. The real you. The man who brings me tea without me asking, and who remembers the titles of my favorite books. The man who despises the things he must do, but does them without hesitation to protect the people that he loves. That is a man worth choosing." He kissed me, a gesture so gentle it seemed at odds with the pain he must have been feeling. "I do not deserve you." "Probably not," I agreed. "But you are stuck with me anyway." For the very first time since the attack began, he smiled. It was a genuine, real smile. "Promise me something," he said. "What?" "Promise me that you will not give up on me, on us, no matter how dark and difficult this becomes." I pressed my forehead against his. "I promise." Outside our window, the great city carried on with its usual indifferent hum. But inside that small room, we held on to each other, as if the entire world were trying to rip us apart. The next day would undoubtedly bring more violence, more threats, and more choices that seemed impossible. But for tonight, we had this. For tonight, it was more than enough. Dante spent the next 3 days recovering. And during those 3 days, the entire world shifted. His family came, not his soldiers, but his actual blood relatives. His mother was an elegant woman with eyes that missed nothing. His younger sister was fiercely protective and immediately suspicious of me. His uncle arrived, a man who clearly managed a significant part of their entire operation. They all came to the safe house, and they all came to inspect me. So, his mother said, her sharp gaze sweeping over me in a thorough appraisal. You are the girl who has been causing all of this trouble? Mama, Dante warned from his place on the couch. He was healing, but his voice was still strained. I am not placing blame on her, she replied coolly. I am simply making an observation. She faced me again, her gaze intense. Do you have any idea what it means to be with my son? Can you truly comprehend what your life is about to become? I think I am beginning to, I managed to say. She cut me off. Carrara, you must understand it completely, or this world will utterly destroy you. In our family, there is no place for half measures. His sister Isabella stood with her arms folded tightly. That woman is not like us. She has no concept of our world. How could she possibly survive it the way you had to? Dante spoke from the side, his voice low but firm. She will survive by being far stronger than anyone gives her credit for. Isabella's hard expression seemed to melt just a little as she looked at her brother. You genuinely care for this woman. He answered without hesitation. Yes, I care enough to put everything on the line. I have done so already. His mother let out a long breath. Then she did something that shocked me. She came and sat down next to me on the sofa. For his entire adult life, my son has never let himself feel for anyone who was not part of this family. He has experienced a loneliness that would shatter most men. If you were the one to finally get through to him, then you are a truly remarkable person. She gently took my hand in hers. But being remarkable is not always enough. Are you ready for everything that is coming? The constant danger, the heavy secrets, the compromises that will test your soul. I do not know, I confessed, my voice barely a whisper. But I love him. Surely that has to mean something. In our world, love means everything, and it also means nothing. It can make you powerful and expose your greatest weaknesses at the same time. She gave my hand a firm squeeze. You must choose with absolute certainty, Elena. Because after you step into this life, there is no possibility of ever walking away from it. When they were gone, I moved to sit next to Dante on the couch. Your family is incredibly intense, I said. That is certainly one way to describe them. He wrapped his arm around me, pulling me against his side. You are not obligated to do any of this. You understand that, right? I can still keep you safe from a distance. I could set you up in a place where you would be secure. A place my enemies could never find you. You could go back to your normal life. Is that the life you want? He asked gently. I want you to be safe. I want you to be happy. Even if being happy means I have to let you go. I shifted my body to face him directly. But what if the only thing that makes me happy is being here with you? What if I am done with safe and normal? Elena, my entire life has been about being careful. I have been good, I have followed every rule society laid out. And what did it get me? I was all alone in a tiny apartment, buried under a mountain of debt, with no one I could truly call a connection. I reached out and took his hand. Being with you makes me feel alive. I am terrified, of course, but I am alive in a way I have never known before. You would be sacrificing everything you have ever known. Your entire career, all of your friends, even the simple freedom to walk down a street without bodyguards. Is that a price you are truly willing to pay? I want you. We can figure out all the other things as we go, together. He watched my face for a long, quiet moment, his eyes searching mine. Then he reached into his pocket and retrieved a small box covered in velvet. This belonged to my grandmother, he explained. He opened it, revealing a stunning ring inside. It was vintage and unbelievably elegant, with a single perfect diamond held in a setting of intricate metalwork. In my family, this ring symbolizes a deep commitment. It is a promise of protection. It means you are now under the shield of our entire family, and anyone who would dare to harm you will have to face every single one of us. My breath hitched in my throat. Dante, are you asking me? I am not proposing marriage. Not right now. Not when you are still trying to decide if you can accept the man I truly am. He carefully lifted the ring from the box. But I want you to have this. I want you to wear it as a reminder that you have time to make your choice. There is no pressure, and there is no rush. Just think about what it means. He gently slid the beautiful ring onto my finger. It was a perfect fit. This certainly feels like a proposal, I whispered, staring at the diamond. It is a promise, he corrected. A promise that I will wait for your decision, that I will give you all the space you need to choose this life with your eyes wide open. He raised my hand and pressed a soft kiss to my knuckles. And it is a promise that regardless of what you decide, I will always make sure that you are safe. I gazed at the ring as it captured the light, sending sparkles across the room. What if my decision has already been made? Has it? He asked, his voice full of hope. I believe it has. I think I made my choice the night you gave me that first kiss. Or maybe it was even before that. It was the moment I stopped being terrified of you and started being terrified of a life without you. A powerful emotion darkened his eyes. Are you absolutely certain? I am certain. He drew me onto his lap with immense care, ever mindful of his still healing wound, and he kissed me as if I were his only salvation in this world. Then you belong to me, he murmured against my mouth, completely and forever. And I belong to you, no matter what happens next, no matter what, I vowed in return. Outside the safety of these walls, his enemies were already plotting their next attack. His family was observing me, judging me, waiting for me to crack under the pressure. But in that room, we had each other. And for now, that felt like it was more than enough to confront whatever was coming our way. The war found its end at a wedding. It was not my own, however. The ring that once belonged to Dante's grandmother was still on my finger. It was a promise that we had not yet brought to completion. No, the wedding that altered the course of everything was a calculated, strategic alliance. It was a union between Dante's family and the Cardels, a formidable family that held power in the south. His cousin was set to marry their daughter. Every significant family in the entire region was expected to be there, and that included the Rossettis. They were the very family that had made an attempt on my life. It is considered neutral territory, Dante clarified while his men assisted him with his tuxedo. His wound was finally healed, but it left behind another scar to join his collection. These are ancient traditions. There is to be no violence during a wedding celebration. It represents the single place where I can conduct negotiations without resorting to bloodshed. Or it could be an elaborate trap, I countered. It is probably a bit of both, he admitted. He turned to face me, looking devastatingly handsome in the black suit. You are not required to go. You could remain here where it is safe. I am going. I had already selected my dress. It was a deep burgundy color, elegant and perfectly suited for a Mafia wedding. Where you go, I will go. That was the promise we made. Do you remember? He walked over to me and took both of my hands in his. If anything were to happen, I cut him off. Nothing is going to happen. You are far too intelligent to walk into a known trap without having a backup plan. He offered a slight, confident smile. I actually have 3 backup plans prepared. The wedding took place at a grand estate just outside the city. It featured sprawling, manicured gardens and a historic villa. Security personnel were everywhere, though they tried to maintain an air of subtlety. I entered the hall on Dante's arm, with his grandmother's ring on my finger, and I could feel the gaze of every person in the room follow our every move. The ceremony itself was quite beautiful and deeply traditional, the kind of lavish event that cost more than what most people spend on their homes. However, it was during the reception that the true business of the day was conducted. Dante left me in the company of Isabella as he moved through the crowded room. He was shaking hands and exchanging hushed words with men whose faces I was beginning to recognize from the security briefings. They were power brokers, supposed allies, and sworn enemies, all compelled to act with temporary civility because of tradition. He is completely in his element here, Isabella commented, as she watched her brother command the room. This is the life he was born to lead. He negotiates with men who secretly wish him dead. He leads, he unifies, and he makes them believe in a cause greater than their own selfish grudges. She then turned her gaze to me. You have been a positive influence on him. He seems different now. There is a lightness to him somehow, even with everything that is going on. I am not sure how. His life has only grown more complicated since he and I met. Complicated is not always a negative thing. Sometimes it simply means you finally have something in your life that is worth fighting for. She placed a hand on my arm. For whatever it may be worth, I want you to know you have my approval. Not that my approval is something you need. I appreciate it all the same, I told her sincerely. It was at that moment that I spotted him. Carlo Rossetti, the head of the very family that had tried to have me killed. He was standing on the other side of the room, staring at Dante with open hostility. Then, he began to walk directly toward us. Isabella's body went rigid beside me. Remain calm, she whispered. Remember the rules of neutral ground. Rossetti came to a halt directly in front of me, a cold smile on his face. So, you are the grand prize, the little girl who managed to bring Dante Moretti to his knees. My name is Elena, I said, my voice steady. I am well aware of who you are. Everyone in this room knows. You are his weakness. You are the vulnerable point that all of us can now exploit. Carlo. Dante's voice sliced through the tension, as sharp and cold as glass. He seemed to appear from nowhere, his hand immediately finding the small of my back in a protective gesture. You are violating protocol. The wedding ceremony has not yet concluded. I am merely making some introductions. Rossetti's cruel smile did not fade. Your girlfriend ought to know exactly who her enemies are. Oh, she knows. And you should know that she is not afraid of you. She should be. The air around our small group crackled with unspoken threats. Nearby conversations faded into silence. Men's hands began to drift toward the weapons they kept concealed. In that moment, I did something completely reckless. I took a step forward, placing myself directly in the space between Dante and Rossetti. You are correct, I said, my voice steady and clear. I absolutely should fear you. You orchestrated an attempt on my life. You have made multiple moves to harm Dante. You are a dangerous and powerful man who clearly holds no value for human life. Rossetti's eyebrows arched in surprise. So, you do have some understanding. But there is a fundamental piece you are missing. Dante possesses something you will never have. He has loyalty. It is a loyalty not born from fear, nor is it given out of obligation. It comes from people who genuinely put their faith in him. They follow him because he fiercely protects what is his. Because when you launch an attack against him, you do not make him weaker. Instead, you serve as a stark reminder to everyone why they chose to stand with him from the very beginning. I held his cold gaze. So you see, I may be his vulnerability, but I am also the source of his greatest strength. And you just demonstrated that truth for everyone present in this room. A heavy silence filled the space. Then very slowly, Rossetti started to clap. Brava, he said. You possess a great deal of courage. It is a foolish kind of courage, certainly, but it is courage all the same. He turned his eyes to Dante. Perhaps she is worth all the trouble you are going through. She is more than worth it, Dante replied in a low voice, his hand tightening protectively around my waist. Rossetti observed us both for a long moment before letting out a weary sigh. I am willing to propose a truce. This is not an offer of peace. I am nowhere near ready to forgive the sins of your family, but I will agree to a cessation of all direct hostilities. 6 months. After that time, we will revisit this entire situation. Dante paused to consider the offer. 1 full year, and you must withdraw your claim on the harbor territory. 9 months, and I will retain control of the harbor. Done. They clasped hands, sealing the agreement in the presence of witnesses who would ensure they both remained accountable. As Rossetti and his men turned and walked away, I let out a shaky breath I did not realize I had been holding. Did I actually just help broker a truce between two rival families? You certainly did. Dante drew me close against his body, pressing a soft kiss to my temple. That was either the single bravest or the most incredibly reckless thing I have ever seen you do. It was both, I admitted. It was definitely both of them. The remainder of the evening became a dizzying blur. There was dancing, endless glasses of champagne, and carefully worded conversations with powerful people who could just as easily become our allies or our most dangerous enemies, all depending on which way the political winds decided to shift. Yet, through every moment of it, I could feel Dante's solid presence right beside me, a steady and certain anchor. When we were finally able to return to his apartment, we found the penthouse had been fully repaired following the attack. I immediately collapsed onto the plush couch. I cannot believe that actually worked, I said in disbelief. You effectively shamed him into accepting a truce simply by pointing out that his attacks against me only made you appear stronger. It was absolutely brilliant. Dante came to sit beside me, gently pulling me against his side. It was also completely terrifying. Please promise me you will never do that again. I can make no such promises. He let out a low laugh, the deep sound rumbling through his powerful chest. What in the world am I supposed to do with you? You could love me? Perhaps marry me at some point? You could let me help you transform this entire organization into something much less violent. He shifted to look directly at me. Are those demands, or are they simply suggestions? They are very strong suggestions. Elena Rossi. He tenderly cupped my face with his hands. Will you marry me? Actually and truly marry me, not just continue to wear my grandmother's ring as a symbol of a promise. My heart seemed to stutter to a halt inside my chest. Are you being serious right now? I have never been more serious about anything in my entire life. Marry me. Become my wife. Help me construct something far better than the violent legacy I inherited. Please, give me a genuine reason to believe in a future that does not have to end in bloodshed. Yes, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. Yes, I will marry you. He kissed me then, and the kiss tasted of pure, undiluted hope. Epilogue. 6 months later. The wedding was a small and private affair, attended only by our family and the closest of our allies. I wore a traditional dress of soft white, looking every bit the part a Mafia bride was expected to be. Dante was dressed in a black suit, looking devastatingly handsome, and his intense eyes never once left mine for the duration of the ceremony. As he slid the simple wedding band onto my finger, where it joined his grandmother's antique ring, I truly felt the immense weight of my decision. This was the life I had committed myself to, a life that was dangerous, uncertain, and would be forever touched by a violence from which we could never fully escape. But at the same time, I also felt his profound love, his promise of protection, and his unwavering conviction that we could truly build a better world together. I love you, he whispered, just as the priest pronounced us husband and wife. I love you too. We shared a kiss, and in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that this was only the beginning of our story. There would undoubtedly be more battles to fight, more enemies to face, and more nights when the ever-present danger would creep far too close, making our love feel fragile in the face of such violence. But we would confront all of it as one. Me and my Mafia boss, the girl who had once told him no, and the man who spent a month and the rest of his life proving to me that I had made the right choice. Do you really do that? Give up that amount of your freedom. It is not giving up my freedom. It is finally accepting that someone in this world actually cares whether I live or die. I took his hand in mine, pressing it gently against my cheek. Besides, you are not the only one who is feeling scared. Marcus has absolutely nothing left to lose, and I understand just how dangerous that makes a man like him. I refuse to be stupid when it comes to my own safety. You could never be stupid, Dante murmured against my lips. And then his mouth was on mine again, this time with a softer touch, but it was no less intense. His strong hands moved to my waist, lifting me with complete ease until I was straddling his lap right there in the booth. I wrapped my arms tightly around his neck, allowing myself to become completely lost in the taste and the feel of him. When we finally broke away from the kiss, both of us were breathing heavily. Dante's eyes were dark, swirling with desire and something else, something much deeper. Stay with me tonight. I do not mean in the other apartment. I mean here, with me. I understood exactly what he was asking. I knew what it would mean to cross that particular line. Dante, just for sleeping, he clarified, his voice low. Although the possessive grip of his hands on my waist seemed to tell an entirely different story. I just want to hold you. I want to be able to wake up in the morning knowing for certain that you are safe. That is all I want. Unless, of course, you want something more. I really should have said no. I should have tried to maintain some kind of boundary between us. But the simple truth of the matter was that I wanted this just as much as he clearly did. I wanted to fall asleep in his protective arms. I wanted to wake up lying next to him. I wanted to finally stop fighting this undeniable connection that had been steadily building between us since the very first moment I had shattered his car window. Okay, I whispered, my voice barely audible, just to sleep. A slow and devastatingly handsome smile spread across Dante's face as he rose to his feet, lifting me effortlessly along with him. Liar, he murmured softly against my lips, but I will take whatever you are willing to give me. He carried me up the private staircase that led to his apartment, a place I had never seen before. It was much larger and more luxurious than my own. He laid me down on his massive bed with a surprising and touching gentleness. Then, he stripped down to his boxer briefs and climbed into the bed beside me, pulling my body firmly against his chest. This is just sleeping, I protested weakly, though I was intensely aware of the radiating heat of his skin against mine. Absolutely, Dante readily agreed, his hand sliding smoothly under my tank top to rest on the bare skin of my waist. We are just sleeping, with my hand resting on your skin, in my bed, right where you belong. I let out a soft laugh in spite of myself, curling into his embrace. I felt safer and more thoroughly content than I had felt in many years. You are truly impossible. I am yours, he corrected me, pressing a gentle kiss to the top of my head. Now get some rest, sailor. Tomorrow, we are going to finish what Marcus started. I finally fell asleep, held securely in Dante Ravencraft's arms, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, and feeling, for the first time since my mother's difficult diagnosis, that maybe everything was truly going to be okay. I awoke to bright sunlight streaming through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows and the comfortable weight of Dante's arm draped across my waist. At some point in the middle of the night, I must have turned to face him, my cheek now pressed against his bare chest, with one of my legs hooked over his. He was still sound asleep. His normally sharp and intense features were relaxed in slumber. His dark hair had fallen across his forehead in a way that made him appear much younger and somehow less dangerous. I took advantage of the quiet moment to study him properly. I traced the strong line of his jaw with my eyes, the faint scar just above his eyebrow that I had noticed before, and the intricate tattoos that covered the expanse of his arms and chest. Up close, I could finally see the Italian words with perfect clarity. La famiglia è tutto. Family is everything. You are staring, Dante murmured, his voice still rough and heavy with sleep, his eyes remaining closed. You are worth staring at, I admitted without hesitation, and then I immediately felt a warm blush flood my face. His eyes slowly opened, dark and warm like melted chocolate, and his hand tightened its grip on my waist. Let's stay just like this for a while. Let me just have this single moment before the day begins, and everything becomes complicated all over again. so I stayed exactly where I was, letting him continue to hold me, feeling his steady heartbeat beneath my palm, and trying my best not to think about how incredibly right this felt, or how dangerously easy it would be to fall completely for this complicated man who had shown me more genuine care in 3 weeks than I had experienced in many years. "My mother wants to meet you," I said to him quietly. "She called me yesterday. I explained to her that I had moved and now she wants to come and see the new apartment. She wants to see you." Dante's hand shifted to gently cup the back of my head, his fingers tangling themselves in my hair. "What exactly did you tell her about me? That you are my boss? That you were there to help me when I really needed it? That you are—" I trailed off, suddenly unsure of how to properly categorize what Dante had become to me. "That I am yours," he finished for me in a soft voice. "Tell her the unvarnished truth, sailor. Tell her that you are with the most dangerous man in all of Chicago, and explain to her that he would burn this entire city to the ground before he would ever allow anyone to hurt you again. That might just scare her. Good. She should be scared for you. This world that I am bringing you into is not a safe place. It is violent, and it is ruthless, and it is completely unforgiving. But I will promise you this one thing. As long as you are mine, you will never have to face any of it alone." His phone suddenly buzzed on the nightstand, completely shattering the intimate moment between us. Dante snatched it up, his expression immediately darkening as he read the message on the screen. "What is it?" I asked, pushing myself up into a sitting position. "Marcus has finally made his move. 3 of my establishments were vandalized late last night. The windows were shattered, my inventory was a ruin of broken glass and wood, and a threatening message had been left for me to find." Dante was already in motion, dressing with a focused intensity that was unnerving. He is trying to bait me, to force my hand into a fight. "So what is your plan?" Dante pivoted to face me, and in that instant, the man who held me with such tenderness was gone. In his place stood the formidable Mafia boss that all of Chicago knew to fear. He was cold, calculating, and utterly lethal. I am going to give him precisely what he is asking for. He wants a confrontation, and he will get one, but it will be on my terms, inside my territory, and governed by my rules. He crossed the space back to the bed, framing my face gently with both of his large hands. "You will remain here today. I am posting security right outside this door. There will be no exceptions. This entire situation ends tonight, sailor, one way or another." "I need to come with you," I pleaded, my fingers closing around his powerful wrists. "I can be a help to you. I understand Marcus's tactics, and I know his patterns." "No." The single word was absolute, carrying the weight of an unbreakable command. "You are not going anywhere near that man. I will not risk you. Not for something like this. This mess started because of me. It began because I took something from him. I had to, because I desperately needed that money for my mother's medical treatments. I deserve to be there when this conflict reaches its conclusion." A muscle in Dante's jaw clenched. "This matter stopped being about you the very second Marcus chose to hunt you like prey through the streets I control. This is an issue between him and me now. It is about respect, it is about territory, and it is about making him comprehend the consequences of touching what belongs to me. You do not need to witness that lesson." He kissed me with a force that was hard, possessive, and felt utterly final. Then he pulled away. "Stay inside. I am serious, sailor. Do not leave this apartment for any reason." He was gone before I could find another word to argue. The door clicked shut behind him with a terrible, sealing finality. I spent the entire morning pacing the length of the apartment. Then I went to the private gym, trying to exhaust the frantic, anxious energy that was surging through my veins. Dante had stationed 2 security guards outside my door. They were silent professional men who almost certainly concealed firearms beneath their impeccably tailored suits. Around noon, my phone began to ring. The number was unknown. I almost ignored it, but a strange impulse made me answer. "Sailor Thorne." A woman's voice answered, sounding professional and completely unfamiliar. "This is Dr. Chen from Northwestern Memorial. I am calling in regard to your mother." My heart felt like it stopped beating. "What is wrong? Is she all right?" "She is stable, but she has been asking for you. There has been an unexpected complication with her treatment protocol, and she has become quite agitated. She made a specific request for you to come to the hospital." "I will be there in 20 minutes," I promised, already grabbing my jacket from the chair. I managed to get past Dante's security detail with a lie, telling them I was only going downstairs to the building's bar. I said I needed to check on a small matter. From there, I slipped out through a rear exit and hailed a taxi to Northwestern Memorial. The hospital was a place I knew well. I had spent countless months here during my mother's initial treatment, and I knew its hallways and waiting rooms as well as I knew my own apartment. I located her room on the oncology floor, pushed the door open, and walked straight into the trap Marcus had set. He was standing there with two of his associates, and my mother was nowhere in sight. The room was completely empty except for them, and I understood with a sickening, terrible clarity that there had never been a call from Dr. Chen. "I thought you were more clever than this," Marcus sneered, moving deliberately to block my only exit. "But I suppose everyone has a soft spot. Yours is clearly your mother." I took a step back, my mind racing, desperately calculating my defensive options. The room was small, the odds were 2 against 1, and my ribs were still far from healed. There was no way I could fight my way out of this situation. "Dante will murder you," I said, forcing a confidence into my voice that I did not feel, hoping to counter the fear that was coursing through me. "You have to know that, right? The moment he discovers you laid a hand on me, you are a dead man." "Perhaps. But before that happens, I am going to make you pay for dismantling my operation. Then, I am going to use you as a bargaining chip to make Ravencroft back away from my territory." "He wants you? That is fine. He can have whatever is left of you after I am finished." Marcus started to move toward me, and I reacted on pure instinct. I triggered the panic button on my wristwatch. It was the one Dante had given me on my very first day in his apartment, the one that was linked directly to his personal phone and his entire security team. Then, I began to fight. My first punch landed squarely on Marcus's throat, buying me a few precious seconds. His associate charged at me from my left, and I used his own forward momentum against him, sending him crashing into a cart of medical equipment. But the second associate was larger and quicker, and his arms wrapped around my waist like steel bands, lifting me completely off my feet. A burst of pain exploded through my still-mending ribs as he forcefully slammed me back against the wall. I drove my elbow backward, aiming for his face. I felt the crunch of cartilage, but his powerful grip did not loosen in the slightest. Marcus was already getting to his feet, pure fury etched across his features, and I knew with a chilling certainty that I was completely out of options. The door to the room suddenly exploded inward. Dante burst through the opening like a force of nature, followed closely by 4 members of his security team. His eyes locked onto me instantly, taking in the entire situation in a fraction of a second, and the expression on his face was the most terrifying thing I had ever witnessed. "Let her go." Each word was spoken softly, yet punctuated with a barely contained violent rage. The associate who was holding me hesitated for just a moment, and that brief window of uncertainty was all Dante required. He moved with a lethal, blurring speed, ripping me from the man's grasp and pulling me behind him in a single fluid motion. Then he drove his fist into the associate's face with enough brutal force to send the man crashing backward through the hospital room's large observation window. What happened next was both brutal and terrifyingly efficient. Dante's security team quickly subdued Marcus's other associate while Dante himself focused his entire attention on Marcus. He did not use a weapon. He did not need one. His bare fists delivered a calculated punishment with surgical precision. Every single strike was designed to inflict the maximum amount of pain without being lethal. "You," Dante growled between devastating hits, "will not put your hands Another crushing punch landed, on what is mine. He was going to kill him. I could see the cold, murderous fury in his every movement. I saw it in the complete absence of mercy. Marcus was barely conscious, with blood streaming from his mouth and nose, yet Dante showed no sign that he was going to stop. Dante. I grabbed his arm, pulling him back with all my strength. Stop! He is not worth it. Dante turned to look down at me, and for a heart-stopping moment, I was not sure if he even saw me. Then his eyes seemed to focus, truly seeing me for the first time since he entered the room, and the killing rage slowly drained from his expression. Did he hurt you? His hands were on me instantly, his fingers gently probing for injuries. His touch was so careful, a stark contrast to the violence he had just unleashed. Sailor, did he touch you? I am okay. My ribs are aching, but I am okay. I cupped his face with my hands, forcing him to look at me instead of at Marcus's broken form on the floor. I am okay, because you came for me. Because you saved my life. Dante pulled me tight against his chest, and his arms wrapped around me with a desperate, trembling intensity. You gave me your word you would stay in the apartment. You promised me. He called me. He pretended to be a doctor from the hospital, and he said my mother needed me here. I am so sorry, Dante. I am so very sorry. Never apologize for loving your mother. Dante's lips pressed a kiss against the top of my head. But God, sailor, when I received your panic signal, when I realized where you were located, his arms tightened around me even more. I have never been that terrified in my entire life. Boss, one of his security team members stepped forward. The police are on their way. We need to be gone from here. Dante nodded, but did not loosen his hold on me. Anthony, take Marcus and his associates to the warehouse. Make absolutely certain they understand what happens to people who dare to touch my woman. Then see to it that they leave Chicago tonight. I do not care where they go, as long as it is very far away from here. What about the hospital? I asked quietly. Marcus is going to need medical attention. He will get it, but only after he signs papers turning over every property, every asset, and every single connection he has directly to me. After that, he gets patched up and put on a bus that is heading out of state. Dante's voice was ice cold. It was final. He is lucky that I am letting him live at all. We left the hospital using a discreet back exit, easily avoiding the arriving police cars. Inside Dante's car, I finally began to shake as the adrenaline crash hit me with full force. Dante pulled me against his side, tucking me in close. One strong arm came around my shoulders, holding me together as I started to fall apart. I could have gotten you killed, I whispered into his shirt, if you had arrived even 1 minute later than you did. But I did not arrive late. You fought him off, you bought yourself critical time, and you trusted that I would come for you. That is the only thing that matters right now. Back at the apartment, Dante refused to let me out of his sight. He examined my ribs himself, carefully rewrapping them with fresh bandages. He gave me painkillers for the ache and then simply held me on the couch while I tried to process everything that had just happened. It is over now, he murmured into my hair, his voice a low rumble. Marcus is gone. His entire operation now belongs to me. The underground fighting circuits all understand that you are under my protection. You are safe now, sailor. You can finally stop running. What if I do not know how to stop? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. What if I have been fighting and running for so long that I do not know how to just be safe? Dante pulled back just enough to look at me, his hands framing my face. Then allow me to teach you. Every single day I will demonstrate what it means to be truly protected, to be cherished, and to be completely mine. In time, you will come to believe it. The words tumbled from my lips before I could possibly stop them. I am falling for you, I admitted. I realize how fast this is, and it probably sounds insane, but my heart is falling for you, Dante, and the feeling absolutely terrifies me. A slow, devastating smile spread across his face. Good. Because I fell for you the moment you shattered my window. You were bleeding and defiant, yet so beautiful it caused a physical ache in my chest. I have just been patiently waiting for you to catch up. He closed the distance and kissed me then, a kiss that was gentle, sweet, and utterly perfect. I kissed him back with everything I had, pouring 3 long weeks of fear, fragile hope, and a deep, desperate longing into our connection. I love you, Dante whispered against my mouth. I am fully aware that this is too soon, and it is probably far too intense. But I love you, Sailor Thorn, and I will dedicate the rest of my existence to ensuring you never have a reason to doubt that. That kind of declaration should have sent me running. I should have pulled back in fear, but instead I pressed closer into him, letting his arms secure me as I whispered back, I love you too. That evening, what we shared was more than just physical. We made love, slowly and with a profound carefulness. Dante was so mindful of my healing ribs, and his hands were reverent as they moved over my skin. Afterward, as I lay in his arms, I finally grasped what Lucia had tried to tell me. Dante Ravencroft was not a man for casual encounters or temporary arrangements. When he loved, his love was complete, obsessive, and meant to last forever. And I was finally ready for that kind of devotion. I was ready for all of it. 6 months later, I was standing inside the gutted frame of Sal's old gym in Pilsen, watching the contractors breathe new life into the space, transforming it into something honorable. Dante stood beside me, his hand resting at the small of my back, a warm and familiar weight that felt completely right. Are you absolutely sure about this? He asked, the third time he had posed that question since we arrived. I'm sure, I affirmed, leaning into his solid frame and looking at the blueprints spread across a makeshift table. Diamond Women's Boxing Academy. It would be a place where women could get proper training, learn self-defense, and never again have to worry about being taken advantage of by men like Marcus. Dante's arm came around my waist, and I could feel his immense satisfaction in that simple, protective gesture. Marcus had been compelled to leave Chicago, but not before signing documents that transferred all of his assets directly to Dante. In the months that followed, we worked to consolidate his entire operation. We shut down or legitimized most of the underground fighting rings. The other gyms were either sold off or completely repurposed. And this space, the very place where I had spent 3 years fighting just to survive, was being reborn into something that would genuinely help women. Your mother would be so proud of you, Dante murmured close to my ear, and a genuine smile touched my lips. My mother had met Dante about a week after the incident at the hospital. Initially, she was absolutely terrified of him. He was the exact type of dangerous man that mothers spend their lives warning their daughters about. But then, she saw the way he looked at me, the incredible gentleness he showed despite his fearsome reputation, and she began to understand. He is keeping you safe, she had told me later, squeezing my hand. For me, that is the only thing that truly matters. Now, her cancer was in full remission. Her staggering medical bills were completely covered through Dante's insurance connections, which I knew was just a polite way of saying he had paid for everything himself. She had moved into a beautiful new apartment, also thanks to Dante, and filled her days volunteering at the same hospital that had saved her life. Have you made a decision about your instructors yet? Dante asked, his eyes scanning the blueprints. I plan to teach the beginner classes myself, I explained. After that, I'm reaching out to some of the women I fought alongside over the years, the ones who managed to get out of the underground circuit and go legitimate. They have earned a chance to give something back and teach the next generation how to properly protect themselves. I rolled my eyes playfully. And as for the building security, it is, as always, completely excessive. But yes, I have approved all of your security measures. We will have guards present during the evening classes, cameras installed in all the common areas, and panic buttons in every single room. You will know that I am safe for every moment I am in this building. Dante turned me around to face him, his hands coming to rest on my hips. In the 6 months since Marcus had been removed from Chicago, we had settled into a comfortable rhythm. I would work at his bar during the mornings, train women privately in the afternoons, and then spend all of my evenings with him. We had moved into his apartment permanently, but he insisted on keeping my old place as a separate workspace for me to handle the academy's administrative duties. "I can't help myself," he said, his fingers gently brushing a stray strand of hair from my face. "Keeping you safe has become hardwired into my very being now. Besides, you made a promise to me, do you remember?" My hand instinctively moved to my stomach, which was still flat, though it would not be for much longer. I remember. We had discovered I was pregnant only 2 weeks ago, already 12 weeks along, but we had not shared the news with anyone yet. This revelation had pushed Dante into a whole new level of protectiveness that might have felt suffocating if it was not so clearly rooted in profound love. "Twins," he murmured, his large hand covering mine where it rested on my stomach. "We are having 2 babies. My doctor mentioned it's quite common in families that share your genetic history." I stood on my tiptoes to kiss him. "Your doctor also said that I am perfectly healthy and can continue all of my normal activities with just a few modifications. This means you can stop trying to wrap me in bubble wrap." He kissed me back, soft and sweet. "I will make no promises." I could feel his smile against my lips. "You are carrying my children, sailor. I believe I am allowed to be protective." I countered, "You are always protective." He chuckled. "True, but now I have an excellent justification." Lucia appeared at the entrance, holding 2 cups of coffee and looking every bit the polished, successful businesswoman that she was. "Are you two finished being so disgustingly cute yet?" she teased. "We have contract negotiations to attend to in 20 minutes. Dante replied without missing a beat. "We are never finished being disgustingly cute." But he released me and walked over to the table where Lucia was already spreading out additional documents. I watched the two of them work, a brother and sister team discussing business with the same sharp intelligence, and I marveled at how profoundly my entire life had changed. Just 6 months ago, I was bleeding and desperate, smashing windows in the dead of night to survive. Now, here I was, preparing to open my own academy, pregnant with twins, and deeply in love with a man who had completely reordered his entire world just to keep me safe. "Sailor," Lucia called over, "I am going to need your signature on these insurance documents." I walked over and joined them at the table, carefully reading through the paperwork before I signed. The academy was insured against every imaginable possibility, including fire, theft, injury, and natural disasters. Dante had made absolutely certain of it. "Have you two thought about any names?" Lucia asked in a casual tone, though her eyes were sharp with intense curiosity. I glanced over at Dante, who simply shrugged. "We were planning to wait a while before telling people." Lucia smiled knowingly. "Please, I have seen the way my brother looks at you. I had a feeling you were pregnant even before you knew." Her smile widened. "Besides, I fully intend to be the favorite aunt, and that means I need to get involved early." I spoke up. "If they are boys, I have been thinking about Italian names as a way to honor Dante's heritage. If they are girls, I want to name them after some of the strong women I have known in my life." Dante then asked, "And what if it is one of each?" I leaned into him, absorbing his warmth and strength. "Then we will compromise, just like we do with everything else." I felt the absolute certainty that he would protect our growing family with the same fierce intensity he had always used to protect me. The contractors returned from their lunch break, and we spent the rest of the afternoon finalizing decisions for the academy. By the time evening arrived, my feet were hurting and my back was aching, something Dante noticed immediately. "Home," he commanded gently but firmly. "You need to put your feet up, have dinner delivered, and get to bed early." I protested weakly. "I am pregnant, not fragile," but I allowed him to guide me toward his car anyway. He corrected me as he opened the passenger door with the same care a man would use when handling something priceless. You are both. And I love you for it, I admitted. Later that night, curled up in our bed with Dante's hand resting gently on my stomach, I reflected on the entire chain of events that had led me to this moment. The desperate act of theft that had started it all, the brutal violence that had delivered me to his doorstep, and the slow journey through fear and trust to the gradual understanding that safety could be found in the most unexpected of sources. "What are you thinking about?" Dante asked, his thumb tracing slow, soothing circles on my skin. "I am thinking about how I broke your window and somehow found my home," I said softly. "I am thinking that the man everyone else is afraid of is the gentlest person I have ever known, that you took the absolute worst night of my life and transformed it into the beginning of everything good." Dante shifted his weight, propping himself up on one elbow so he could look down at me. In the soft glow from the city lights outside, his dark eyes appeared warm and infinite. "I told you on that very first night, you're mine, sailor. That has not changed. If anything, that feeling has only grown stronger with every single day we have spent together." I whispered, "I know. I feel it too. This," I gestured between the two of us. "This was not what I ever expected for my life, but it is exactly what I needed." "You are what I needed," he corrected. He kissed me then, a slow, deep, and perfect kiss, his hand remaining protectively on my stomach where our children were growing. "I love you," he whispered against my lips. "I love our babies. I love the life that we are building together. And I give you my word, Sailor Thorn. I will spend the rest of my existence making sure you never, for a single second, regret breaking my window that night." I looked up at him. "I could never regret it. You saved me, Dante. You saved me in every single way a person can be saved." He pulled me closer. "We saved each other," he corrected softly. "You were in need of protection, and I was in need of someone who was worth protecting. Someone who could see past the dangerous reputation to the actual man underneath. Someone who was brave enough to break my window and strong enough to steal my heart." I fell asleep wrapped in his arms, feeling safer and more completely loved than I had ever imagined was possible. And the next morning, when I opened my eyes and found Dante already awake, just watching me with that intense focus I had come to recognize as him thinking about our future, I understood a fundamental truth. Love was never supposed to be easy. It was supposed to be worth it. Our story was never meant to be simple, safe, or predictable. Sometimes love shows up at 3 in the morning, bleeding and desperate, breaking through your defenses. Sometimes it wears expensive tailored suits, carries firearms, and commands entire criminal empires. Sometimes love demands everything you have to give: your trust, your vulnerability, and the sheer courage to finally stop running from your past. And sometimes, if you are just brave enough to accept it, that love can transform your entire world. It can turn gyms into sanctuaries, mortal danger into profound safety, and deep-seated fear into the feeling of being home. 8 months later, I stood in that very same training academy, now 7 months pregnant with twins who kicked me relentlessly, teaching a class of 20 women the fundamentals of self-defense. Dante watched me from the back of the room, having long since abandoned the pretense that he was not going to hover over me for the entire 9 months. After the class ended, he approached me with a bottle of water and a protein bar. "You need to eat something. The babies require proper nutrition." "The babies need their father to relax," I countered with a smile, but I accepted the snacks anyway. "We are fine, Dante. I am fine. The doctors keep saying I am the healthiest pregnant patient they have seen in months. That is only because I make sure you get enough rest, eat properly, and do not overdo it with your training." He carefully guided me over to a chair, kneeling down in front of me to gently help me take off my training shoes. "Your feet are swollen." "My feet are always swollen," I replied. "I am 31 weeks pregnant with twins. Absolutely everything on my body is swollen." But I allowed him to massage my feet anyway, because despite his sometimes excessive protectiveness, Dante's care for me was always genuine and incredibly tender, and it was exactly what I needed in that moment. It is only 1 month until the Academy's official grand opening, he said, continuing to work on my left foot. Are you completely sure you want to be physically present for that? The babies could decide to come early. This academy will open on its scheduled date, with or without my attendance, but I fully intend to be there. This is my dream, Dante. It is our dream. I am not going to miss it because of some swollen feet and persistent backaches. He looked up at me then, and the sheer amount of love shining in his eyes made my breath catch in my throat. You are truly amazing. Do you know that? Most women would be at home resting right now, preparing themselves for the birth. But you are right here, teaching other women how to protect themselves, building something that truly matters. I learned from the very best, I said softly, cupping his face in my hands. You were the one who showed me that deep trauma can be transformed into a powerful purpose, that violence can be answered with protection, and that our very worst nights can become the solid foundation for our very best life. Dante stood up, gently pulling me to my feet with him and wrapping me in his arms. My pregnant belly was pressed against him, and I could feel our babies kicking between us. He smiled, his lips against my hair. I love you, he whispered. I love this family we have made. I love this life that we have built from the ashes of broken windows and late-night rescues. And I give you my word, sailor, that our children will be raised to know that their mother is the strongest, most courageous, and most beautiful woman I have ever had the privilege to know. And their father, I added, my voice thick with emotion, is the man who looked at a bleeding stranger on his floor and saw a person who was worth saving, worth protecting, and worth loving for the rest of his life. We just stood there together in the quiet of the empty academy, holding one another, two broken people who had discovered their true home in the most unlikely of circumstances. And when our twins were born 3 weeks later, a perfect and healthy boy and girl who were loved beyond all measure, we decided to name them Hope and Justice. We chose those names because that is precisely what we had managed to build together. We had found hope for a much better future, and we had delivered justice for all the women who had endured the same suffering I had. And to think, it all began with a shattered window, a man cloaked in danger, and the very simple question, who hurt your face? The answer to that question, I had come to realize, was not nearly as important as everything that followed. The protection that came after, the love that bloomed, the remarkable transformation of a violent act into something profoundly beautiful. Dante Ravencraftoft had once asked, "Who hurt my face?" And from that moment forward, he dedicated the rest of his existence to ensuring that no one could ever harm me again. That was the real narrative. It was not a story about the breaking, but a story about the healing that followed. It was not a story about the constant danger, but about the profound safety I found in his arms. It was never about the fear, but about the powerful love that ultimately conquered it all.